So before we get into ways in which pharma can collaborate with this industry, maybe it's instructive right now, I think, to talk a little bit about what each of you is doing and what others, if you have any insight into some other of the little companies that we're operating and running and trying to prepare for the day when pharma can, they're here, but they continue to come. And how do we make ourselves attractive as we're vying for attention? Their attention among the other companies, among our competitor companies. The first question really is around business models. It often comes up, I think Manfred mentioned the issue of an allogeneic cell that's a one-to-one. Most times you'd see one-to-ones as autologous cell therapies, but in either case we like to refer to them as patient-specific cell therapies versus a more off-the-shelf approach, which Zami is a proponent of, as well as in Peter's case where there may be no cells at all, where we're just using the virus. So talk a little bit about the business models and how you formed your business model. Was that any part of your thinking as you put the company together, or was it just about the therapy? Was it about, no, I really want an allogeneic or a off the shelf because I think that's a better way later to partner? Were you thinking that far down the road in the beginning? So Zami, maybe you could start.
Okay, it's a hard question with many answers. So when we started our understanding of the cell therapy business, and we discovered that in order to conduct a good clinical study, you have to have good product, and we realized that nothing will happen in that field unless you will show significant clinical outcome. And because of that, we made a decision that we will discover the tools, we'll develop the tools that are required in order to conduct a clinical study that will show significant improvement in using cells. And it took us a few years. We invested heavily into that field. And in January this year, meaning 1.5 months ago, we announced the outcome of a clinical study which was unique in many aspects, which we believe will convince the pharma industry to heavily enter into the game here. And the idea here was to use more than one donor. I don't know if you're aware, but many companies in clinical studies use one donor in the allogeneic space mainly. And the challenge was how to produce a product from different donors and to use a process in order to bring those products, those different donors, to be identical and to demonstrate to the agencies, to the FDA and the European agencies, that you can take two different donors, produce a product, and have the same product in the end of the day, so you have a product and not a specific therapy. So we did it. We spent dozens of millions of dollars to do it. And what we believe, that the understanding of the basic science, that in cell therapy, the process is the product, led us to that investment. And we believe that the only way to convince the pharma companies to enter deeply into that business is to realize that there are benefits by using cell therapy. To our opinion, it should be allogeneic cells which out a match to the patient, so it should be a real off-the-shelf product. And we believe that that will enable the industry to enter more and more deeply into that advanced cell therapy product.
Zami, do you think that the point is that because you can put these up on the shelf, so to speak, and then deliver them, that the cost of goods will be lower, the deliverability is better? What about the off-the-shelf specifically? If you had to just bumper sticker what it is, what would you say?
It's a product in a bottle, a product in a vial, meaning that you have to have a good source, and we believe the placenta is good. The best source, nobody understands it today, but as a world will realize it later today. So you take young cells, you process them precisely, and you make sure that from A to Z, you control the process. And we had to develop a dedicated thawing device to ensure that the cells are prepared properly before administration to the patient. So that's what led us to the move, and what we really believe, again, I'm sorry to repeat it again and again, that the clinical outcome will define the decision of the industry to enter more deeply into the allogeneic space. And they have to have the feeling that all the solutions are there, the upstream, the downstream, that it's a real product like antibodies.
That's a long bumper sticker. So would it be more, do you think that just pharma understand that better than they do other types of cell therapy?
If you look into the industry today, many of them are watching. Novartis entered into the autologous space recently, and we really hope a good result will be there. But the other parties are watching and waiting to see clinical outcome to justify the entrance into cell therapy. Okay. And one can look into 20 years ago when people have been hesitating whether to enter into the antibody industry, and today all of them are there.
So I'm trying to bait Zami Montfort, but he won't go for it. So could you, yours is the patient-specific cell therapy, and which is just sort of the exact different business model. Does that present any concerns to you about your ability to partner this down the road?
No, obviously not, because it had already been partnered. So it's there's no question that both allogeneic and autologous will fly if the clinical data support it. And it's obvious that for pharma, they are used to fill and finish millions of the same into the same kinds of vessels and to deliver it to the pharmacies around the world. But I think it's also fairly obvious that that is not most likely the business model which will be successful in a vast number of disease indications. If you would ask me whether it's autologous or allogeneic, I think it just depends on the disease you are trying to tackle. And there are diseases which can be probably easily approached by, or easily quote unquote, of course, anything ever easy, but by autologous, by allogeneic approaches, whenever the cells don't have to survive for long, for instance, then it's relatively easy to imagine that if the cells are only supposed to trigger something by secreting cytokines and so on. But if you want to do real tissue regeneration, then for me it's still hard to see how the immune system would not, over the long run, recognize and destroy fully allogeneic cells. So for me, the question is not whether it's one or the other. All those which will deliver strong clinical readout will make it.
Okay.
That's my paradigm.
So you agree with Zami that's about the clinical outcome more than that business model
I
portion?
think that's what will be driving it. And
Right.
in our case, we did not worry about the business model. For us, it was clear that if you try to work in transplantation where no matched donor is available, then you are automatically in the donation setting, and then you try to develop that into a product. And if clinical readout is good and you have a grossly extended overall survival and you have absence of graft versus host disease, as we see in our studies, then I think the business model will not be the gatekeeper. Scalability maybe, but not the business model.